The story of Jubal is not just one of interviews, it's one of unraveling hidden truths, uncovering secrets buried beneath the surface of seemingly normal lives. Jubal Miller, a seasoned investigator known for his sharp instincts and keen eye for deception, never thought his line of work would thrust him into a tangled web of emotions, pain, and betrayal. Every week, he sat across from ordinary people partners, lovers, spouse, each one with a story to tell. But it was never just a story. It was always a narrative of secrets, of moments that would change their lives forever. In his world, honesty was a rare currency, and deception was the norm. Tonight, Jubal had an interview scheduled with a married couple in Austin, Texas, a city known for its live music, eclectic culture, and beneath its surface a darker side. He had been investigating reports of infidelity for months, and his next subject, a man named Steve Adams, was no stranger to betrayal. What started as a simple request for help had snowballed into a case full of accusations, hidden messages, and lies that could ruin everything they held dear. Jubal entered the dimly lit cafe where the couple had agreed to meet, the air thick with tension, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the subtle notes of something more sinister. Steve Adams sat at a table in the corner, his eyes scanning the room with a mix of impatience and apprehension. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man, his face hardened by years of stress and sleepless nights. "Steve," Jubal said, extending his hand. "I am Jubal Miller. Glad to meet you." Steve shook his hand with a firm grip, but didn't speak. His eyes, however, betrayed something much deeper. There was fear, regret, and a heavy weight that seemed to hang around him like a shroud. "Thanks for coming," Jubal continued, sitting down across from him. "I understand this isn't easy, but I need to know everything. I can help you, but you have to be honest with me." Steve nodded, but didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out his phone and began scrolling, as if searching for something to say. "So," Jubal began, trying to ease the tension, "let's talk about your wife, shall we? How long have you been married?" 4 years, Steve replied quietly, still staring at the screen of his phone. "We have a good life, or we did." "Good life," Jubal repeated, leaning forward. "But it's not as good as it seems, is it?" Steve finally looked up, his gaze hardening. "You've seen the texts, haven't you?" Jubal smiled slightly, not out of amusement, but in recognition of the pain in Steve's voice. He knew exactly what Steve was referring to, the messages that had surfaced, implicating his wife, Carla. Betrayal was always the hardest pill to swallow, but it was Jubal's job to force it down, no matter the consequences. Jubal leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "You see, Steve, I've been looking through some of your wife's messages, and I've got to tell you, some of what I've found doesn't look good." Steve stiffened, the blood draining from his face. "What have you found?" Jubal took a breath and began recounting the messages. The 21st of April, Stu texted someone, "Happy birthday, love. Hope you enjoy the best of your day. I am sorry I couldn't be there, but I must give you your present in person." Sound familiar? Steve's jaw tightened. "It's my best friend Monica. She's like a sister to me. I call her love because it's a thing we do. Nothing more." "Uh-huh," Jubal replied, his voice calm but with an edge of disbelief. "Then here is this one. May 4th, you texted, 'Hey, love, just be honest with me.' That's a pretty intimate way to talk to someone, don't you think?" Steve's eyes flickered nervously. He shifted in his seat. "I don't know what you are trying to get at here. Monica and it here is nothing romantic. I am telling you, here is nothing." "All right," Jubal said, his tone suddenly sharper. "Let's take it one step further. May 17th, she sent you a message saying, 'Just be honest with me.' You told her to trust you. Then, the 5th of June, she texts you, 'You are a heartbreaker.' And that's when things started getting messy, right?" Steve looked away, his expression clouding with guilt. "It wasn't like that. It was a misunderstanding." Jubal pressed harder. "What kind of misunderstanding?" "Because, Steve, I am seeing something here, a pattern that's hard to ignore. And it gets worse. On May 27th, Carla sent you a message saying, 'Don't text me anymore. We're done.' But then, on the 5th of June, she's back in your life, telling you you are a heartbreaker. What is going on here, Steve?" Steve gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. I don't know what's real anymore. Let's move on," Jubal said, his voice cold as he reached into his bag and pulled out a printout of the messages he had uncovered. Now, Carla sent you some other messages that, well, they suggest something more than just friendship, Steve. Have you heard of Father Robert? The mention of the priest made Steve flinch visibly. Yeah, he said quietly. He's been close to Carla, but she's always been vague about their relationship. Jubal leaned in. Well, it seems like Father Robert might be closer than you think. In one of Carla's messages, she says, Father Robert is a sweet person and a good kisser. Care to explain that, Steve? Steve's face drained of color. His hands trembled slightly as he placed them on the table. I don't know what to say, Jubal. I've heard rumors, but she's never told me anything directly. The tension in the air thickened as Jubal continued, recounting the messages in meticulous detail. Carla had confessed her growing feelings for Father Robert, even comparing him to Denzel Washington from the movie For Green. She spoke about how Father Robert had been asking about Steve, inquiring about their life together, and making subtle advances. But it wasn't just words that were troubling. Carla had been secretly meeting with Father Robert, lying about her whereabouts, sending cryptic messages that Jubal had pieced together like a puzzle. I confronted her about it, Steve said, his voice barely a whisper. She denied it. She told me I was being paranoid, that I didn't understand the nature of their relationship. Jubal nodded, his face expressionless. I am afraid that's not the whole truth, Steve, because I've seen the way she talks about Father Robert. It's not just admiration, it's desire. Steve stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back. No, this isn't happening. This can't be real. Jubal didn't flinch. You know what's real, Steve? It's all right here, in black and white. As Steve stood there, trembling with anger and disbelief, Carla entered the cafe, her presence as striking as her demeanor. She walked up to the table, her eyes meeting Steve's with a mixture of guilt and defiance. Steve! She began, but Steve cut her off. Don't, he shouted, his voice raw with emotion. Don't you dare lie to me anymore. Jubal watched the drama unfold, his job done. But it was clear this wasn't just an interview. This was the unraveling of a life, of a marriage that would never be the same again. Carla stood frozen for a moment, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly. She had come to the cafe to meet Steve, but the weight of what Jubal had just revealed hung heavily in the air. There was no escaping it now. Steve, I never meant for things to get this far, Carla stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted to hurt you. Steve took a step back, his fists clenched at his sides. You think I don't know? You've been lying to me for months, Carla. Every time I tried to trust you, you pushed me away. And all this time you've been with him. Father Robert. How long, Carla? How long? The silence between them was deafening. Carla's lips quivered as she struggled to find the right words, but nothing came out. Her gaze flicked toward Jubal, who had been a quiet observer, watching the scene unfold with a practiced detachment. Jubal's voice broke the silence, calm yet filled with an underlying understanding. Steve, it's important that you listen to her. I know this is painful, but you deserve the truth, even if it cuts deep. Carla finally found her voice, her words rushing out in a stream of emotion. I never wanted to fall for him. It just happened. It was like he understood me in ways you didn't anymore. I thought it was just a crush, just something fleeting. But then, every time I tried to pull away, he drew me back in. And she broke off, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't know what happened. I never meant for it to go this far. Steve's anger flared. How could you do this to me? To us? I gave you everything, Carla. I trusted you with my heart, with my life. And you betrayed me with him? Carla reached out for Steve, her hand trembling as she tried to grasp his. Please, Steve, I am so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe me. I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. But Steve recoiled, his face hardening with a pain so raw, it was almost palpable. Lost? You think that makes it better? You think that's an excuse? Jubal could feel the tension in the air, the crushing weight of broken trust hanging like a storm cloud above them. He knew this moment, this raw exchange of emotions, was more than just an interview. It was the breaking point. It was the moment when everything would change. Steve, Carla pleaded, her voice cracking. I love you. I do. But I was confused, and I let myself get swept up in something that was never meant to be. I swear, it was nothing like what you think it was with him. I never intended for it to go that far. Steve slammed his hand on the table, cutting her off. Don't you dare tell me what it wasn't. I've seen the messages, Carla. I've heard what you've said about him. You kissed him. You thought about leaving me for him, didn't you? Carla's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't know what to do. I thought about it, yes. But that doesn't mean I actually wanted to leave you. I love you, Steve. Please don't. Jubal had heard enough. This wasn't about facts anymore. It was about raw emotion, about the betrayal that had shattered their relationship. He could see the destruction in Steve's eyes, the disbelief that his world was crumbling around him. Carla's words, though filled with regret, couldn't undo what she had caused. Steve, Jubal interjected, his voice calm yet firm. You have a right to be angry. But you also need to understand that this moment is bigger than just one affair or one betrayal. It's about trust. It's about your relationship. And once trust is broken, it's hard, sometimes impossible, to put it back together. Steve's chest heaved with every breath, his emotions warring within him. He wanted to scream, to lash out. But instead, he stood there frozen in place, his mind racing through the years of their marriage. Every moment of doubt, every whisper of suspicion that had gone unnoticed until now. Carla stepped closer, her voice pleading, desperate. Please, Steve, I'll do anything. I know I've hurt you, but I swear I never wanted this. I want to fix this. I want us to fix this together. Just give me a chance. Steve looked at her, his wife, the woman he thought he knew, the woman who had shared his life, his dreams. He had promised to stand by her through thick and thin. And now, here they were, standing at the edge of a precipice, with everything they had built on the brink of collapse. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling as he spoke. You want me to believe you? After everything? After all the lies? All the hiding? All the pretending? Carla stepped back, her body trembling with the weight of his words. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve your trust. But I am asking you, Steve, to at least give me a chance to prove that I still love you, that I can make this right. Steve remained silent, his expression unreadable. The conflict inside him was visible, the pull between the love he once had for her and the betrayal that now poisoned everything they had shared. Jubal, sensing the overwhelming emotions flooding the room, knew this was the moment of truth. Steve, Carla, this is where you both decide what comes next. It's up to you two, but understand this: whatever you choose, it will change the course of your lives forever. Carla reached out again, but Steve stepped back. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can look at you the same way again. The silence that followed was thick with grief, confusion, and the weight of choices that would shape their future. The meeting ended in silence. Jubal could feel the air change as Steve and Carla slowly gathered themselves, the once hopeful warmth between them now tainted by doubt. Steve didn't say goodbye to Carla when they parted ways, and Carla, for the first time, didn't protest. The truth was out in the open now, and the damage had been done. Jubal watched as they walked away in different directions, two people who had once shared everything, now divided by betrayal. It was a familiar sight for him, one he had seen all too often, but every time, it was just as painful. The end of something beautiful, the beginning of something broken. He sighed and gathered his things. His job wasn't done. He had helped Steve uncover the truth, but now it was up to him to heal, to decide if forgiveness was possible. As Jubal stepped out of the cafe, the Texas sun setting behind him, he reflected on the nature of love, trust, and betrayal. He had witnessed it time and time again, but no matter how many times he did, it never got easier. The stories were always the same, yet always different, each one filled with emotion, with pain, with a thirst for answers that would never quite quench the ache in the hearts of those involved. Jubal knew he would continue his work, that he would keep uncovering the truth no matter how painful. After all, in the end, the truth was all anyone ever had left. Thank you for listening to today's True Crime episode. Like, follow, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell for more stories.